England versus India. The Cricket Badger Test Match Daily Podcast. Can Joe Root's England dominate on home soil? 5 mouth-watering test matches. Can Virat Kohli's India conquer the final frontier? Loving to talk test cricket every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome along. It is another edition of the England against India Test Match Dailies on the Cricket Badger podcast. Good to have you with us watching, or if you're listening later, good to have you with us there as well. And as always, I am James Butler, the Cricket Badger, joined by my fan badgers. And today we have Neil Varani, but Raj and Nakul as well. And let's start, gentlemen, with 2 days away from the 4th Test match at the Oval. And I've had a couple of questions coming in. John Wright has basically said, I'm not sure what weather forecast John Wright has been looking at, but he says weather forecast for the Oval does not look too flash, especially for days 4 and 5. With the series in the balance and the final test being in Manchester, which is kind of synonymous with rain, isn't it, Manchester? What do we think about a reserve day for test matches from here on? I've looked at the weather forecast for the Oval, and it actually looks all right to me. It looks like we get, I think, 10% chance of rain, which I think most weather forecasters would put in just to cover themselves anyway. But Neil, having a 6-day, I mean, obviously this stems from the World Test Championship final that India played against New Zealand, where the reserve day was required. Are you a fan or not?
James, I'm backstage.
Nakul, do you want to take the question on? Because Neil's there on screen. But
the 6th day was absolutely necessary for the World Test Championship final and completely makes sense for a standalone game, for a final. The scheduling just doesn't allow for a reserve day most of the time. You know, these 3 test matches heading the Oval and Old Trafford are back to back to back. Lords and Trent Bridge were back to back. This is not an uncommon occurrence, and this tour doesn't even have any limited overs internationals. Most of the time, frankly, it wouldn't be necessary. I suppose, you know, it's a reserve day, so you assume it wouldn't be. But it's very rare that a test match that has even 4 full days of cricket ends in a draw that wouldn't have been that, you know, because time ran out because of the weather. It's quite rare that 2 days of cricket are rained out. That what happened in the World Test Championship final doesn't happen very often. The forecast from I've seen, it looks, you know, there might be some showers on and off on Sunday, but the rest of the days look fine. And I think, you know, either you have a reserve day for everything, or you can't just add one because the weather might be a little bit dodgy. I mean, that's, you know, how long do you want to go with that? If you don't get a result on the reserve day, do you keep going with that? And then, you know, everyone knows the criteria under which this series is being played. I just don't think it's logistically feasible.
The thing is, as well, Nakul, test match grounds in England, certainly, they put 2 weeks through the calendar to prepare the ground for the test match and then to play the test match. If you then extend that 2 weeks post the test match or post the normal test match, it then actually has impact on the domestic schedule as well, because that ground is not available to play for the county sooner than it would have been as well. So it has knock-on effects, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be adding 2 weeks on the end, but you'd be adding, you know, a day on the end, which could throw things off a little bit. I mean,
it's a very congested domestic schedule, though, isn't it? So, you know, it would have repercussions.
There's a lot of cricket to fit in, internationally and domestically. The other thing about the grounds drain so well. I mean, this is part of the reason that unless it literally rains for 2 days, you're not going to lose enough cricket usually to justify having a reserve day. What happened in the World Test Championship final was a freak occurrence. That doesn't happen very often in England or anywhere, really. English test grounds, I know Headingley's had its issues, but every other test ground in England drains brilliantly to the point where if it's been raining for half a day, within an hour or an hour and a half at most, you could be playing again, and you get your cricket in. You can extend it later because even as we're coming into late August, early September, the light is good enough that you can still play till 6:30. It seems kind of a, what's the phrase? Asking for a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist.
And also, Neil, you're back on. You were on anyway, but you're back on with us. Draws are a part of cricket, aren't they? Draws are a part of Test match cricket. If you're playing a series, a draw is a factor.
Yeah, and especially when we get to the back end of the game, then it is a legitimate target as well. We saw England in the last 2 tests they played at Lords have gone for draws, once successfully and once not. That you can't take away the opportunity to park the bus without fundamentally changing the game.
Well, imagine if Jose Mourinho was a cricket manager. Oh.
yeah. Get well ahead in the first 2 days and then just defend it for your
Play
life.
11 Dom Sibley's.
Jose Mourinho would love the Ranji Trophy, where in the knockouts you win if you get a first innings lead.
yeah. What about you, Raj? Where do you stand on having a reserve day? Is it something you see as being essential, or are we good as we are?
I think we are good as we are, and I agree with what Nakul mentioned. I think logistically it's not feasible. At the same time, if you talk about the World Test Championship finals, then, it makes sense to have a reserve day on the finals, but you cannot have, say, an extra reserve day for all the test matches. We are talking about shortening the test matches to 4-day test matches, but here, we cannot add an extra day because fans are getting impatient, and 5 days of test match cricket, I think, is enough to produce a result.
Neil, I mean, that is one of the kind of strange things about this, isn't it? That the World Test Championship comes along, we need a reserve day, so all of a sudden everybody wants to tag an extra day on, whereas sometimes the same people a year ago were arguing for 4-day test matches.
Yeah, people seem to change their published opinions depending on what the actual situation is currently, with no consistency or long-term thinking. I think Knuckle made a very good point before, that the domestic calendar, especially in England, is just too tight to even give that opportunity. We saw with the women's test that got played on a used track. Maybe there was a bit of oversight there, but there's so much cricket that you can't always block out that additional time just in case. The other thing is that it costs money to put on a day of cricket. The salaries for all the staff who are there, the contracts for catering, and so on. We already know that outside the big 3, teams lose money hosting Test cricket. To add another day where you don't have that guaranteed income to offset the sunk costs that you have in staging that would really make Test cricket unfeasible in those countries. And you can't have separate conditions within a tournament like the World Test Championship across countries. It's a bit different when you have the World Test Championship final. I mean, I was at Edgbaston in 2013 for the Champions Trophy final, where they changed the conditions basically on the hoof because they hadn't put in a reserve day and ended up extending the latest time that you could start play and reduced it to a T20. That's completely separate to adding in that additional day across the board. Logistically and financially, I think it's just a complete non-starter where people are trying to change the entire outlook for a single occurrence, whereas you have to make policies based on trying to benefit 90% of the situations that arise, and not just looking after the one unicorn that may appear.
You can't please everybody all the time, can you? I mean, that's an adage that goes through Life, Big Time Dwarfer, I'm sure that's not his real name, has been in touch on the comments. You can too. Have a comment on and we can discuss whatever you want to bring up today. He says the turnaround times are already short. Using reserve days would surely lead to more injuries. I mean, Raj, that's an issue, isn't it? I mean, we talk about recovery time between test matches, particularly when they're back to back, and we purr at the fact there's a week off sometimes between test matches because it allows bowlers time to recover. It's not just bowlers either. Batsmen need a breather every now and again too. But having extra days potentially on the end of a test match makes that even worse, doesn't it?
That's going to cause a problem, and especially during times of COVID, we would think that a break is more essential than the usual times. And especially after tests like Headingley, you see that Indian bowlers were bowled a lot of overs. They were out there in the park for a lot of time. So definitely fast bowlers need that extra bit of rejuvenation where they would need that extra break. Adding an extra day, the time between the two test matches just reduces, and it's just not good for teams out there, because we all want competitive cricket at the end of the day. And when your players are injured, you give fans that maybe a little bit of disappointment. You do not want your best players to miss out on injuries. So in that sense also, like you said, James, adding an extra day is just not too good overall, and we have to look at the larger picture.
Raj, your wall behind you, it's every time you come on, I wanted to ask you this, but is that actually pimply or is it just flat with dots on it?
It's flat with dots on it, and it's just a wallpaper.
It looks like it's metal with little pimply bits on it. It looks really good. Right, let's move on, because we've got a few questions to go through today. Gabba Gully, which I'm sure is not his real name either, on Twitter. He's asked, he's commented, while Ashwin's treatment by India is intriguing, do England have any strategy for their spinners? Leach has had a wasted year. You could argue Leach has had 2 wasted years, to be honest, because he was in the bubble all last summer, wasn't he, without playing. Parkinson has been apparently dumped. Mo has been yo-yoed. Bessie's out in the cold. Someone turning it away from the right-handers could be useful in the next 7 test matches, Knuckle.
I don't think it's fair to say that Parkinson's been dumped. I mean, he's played actually more limited overs cricket this year than he has previously and hasn't yet made a test debut. I was thinking that he might play these last 2 test matches. I actually didn't foresee Moeen Ali coming back into the test lineup, and he's done well enough that probably won't happen. Now, I mean, the individual cases, I think Jack Leach would think himself hard done by. Moeen Ali would think himself hard done by as well, particularly with how he was treated in India and how he was briefly, albeit but even so, hung out to dry at the end of the second test match with the people were allowed to think that it was his decision to go home and whatnot, and possibly cost Ed Smith going trying to sort of strong arm Moeen to stay and cost him his job.
It was really badly handled, all of that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. Arguably, it was their only real significant misstep in terms of the rotation and the rotation policy, and the misstep was not following it, basically. But I mean, that's a sort of separate issue. Just briefly on Ashwin before I come to England's the wider context of how England treat spinners. I don't know Ashwin's treatment. We understand that he was in line to play up until the morning of the Lord's Test match. He was very close to playing the Headingley Test match. He's been, doing his usual stuff in public and his YouTube channel and whatnot, and he seems in good spirits as far as we can tell. And the decision seemed to have been communicated fairly clearly within the team, and that's all you can ask for. And the team, the series has gone okay from India's point of view, and the bowlers have done well. So you there was a followable logic, and to a point, it's worked. Joe Root's captaincy of spinners and the general treatment of spinners in England is slightly confusing. In general, I mean, wasn't quite sure about whether he trusted either Rashid or not when he was in the Test squad. Dom Bess being very publicly criticised after taking wickets expensively, but still taking wickets in that first Test match.
It predates Joe Root as well, because Alistair Cook wasn't particularly fantastic at managing his spinners either, was he? I mean, there's obviously the Simon Kerrigan incident, but that wasn't a one-off.
No, I mean, Alistair Cook, I think, was... It's sort of he didn't quite know what to do once he didn't have Graham Swan, who could be 2 bowlers in one. I mean, a lot of captains would struggle with the sudden and unexpected loss of a bowler of of that quality. And there is a slight skepticism about spin in England in general. I mean, an example would be, every time a county pitch turns on day one, people are up in arms. No one's bothered when the seam bowlers are taking wickets and you have 15 wickets in a day with not a ball bowled above 75 miles an hour. Not to discount the skill of those bowlers, but that's not great for the development of high quality Test cricketers either, and is undoubtedly skewed towards one skill set. But seam is viewed very much as the default in this country, and understandable because of conditions, but yeah, there is a skepticism, and it goes right down to the club level and the school level. You have to really be. You can't just be a spinner anymore in most teams. You have to be able to bat as well. I think so. I think the point about English spin skepticism is well made. Although I'd be wary of reading too much into any sort of treatment of Ashwin.
Right, Raj, if you're Ashwin, those last words of Knuckles, really. You come for a 5-test series. You're the number 2 bowler in the world. Most people will suggest you're certainly right up there in terms of the best spinner in the world. Is he going to be happy if he goes through an entire series without playing? There does seem to be quite a good camaraderie between the Indians. They do seem to understand the bigger picture these days, and the team is more important than the individual. But I can't imagine Ashwin's going to be happy if he sits through the next 2 without playing.
Definitely not happy, because Ashwin also, embodies the spirit, which Anil Kumble had. He's a fighter from inside, and, he would be gutting to get on the field and perform for his team. So in that sense, he would definitely not be happy. But considering the larger scheme of things, which Nakul mentioned, I think the spirit is still there. And Ashwin being a total team player, he would not be totally disappointed, and he would want to help the team's cause. But as a fan, James, I would admit that, I was totally baffled by Ashwin's exclusion in the Headingley Test, especially because before the series, if you could ask me, in the first test, India went ahead with Jadeja and Shardul and preferred Ashwin to be on the sidelines. That was still okay, because that went well with the balance of the squad. The second test, even though, the first 4 fast bowlers were relentless and amazing in the last session of Lords, I would still say that, the balance of the side took a big dent in the second test, and they carried on the same side for the Headingley Test as well, which was totally surprising, because you would want Jadeja to be there in the team, and because Jadeja's batting form has been remarkable, he's sort of that 3-dimensional player, who would give everything in the field as well, and is a handy enough 5th bowler for India. But considering the tail that we have, which is a long tail, perhaps, and definitely Ashwin's exclusion baffles me. At the same time, Joe Root coming on with 3 tons in a row, you would expect someone like Ashwin to break that rhythm. He did successfully break Smith's rhythm down under when, Smith was going like he was an ominous touch. So Ashwin is that sort of a bowler, who would have extra arsenal in his armory, and he would come around the wicket, get the ball to drift, get the ball to spin, and he's more than a handy batter as well. So I'm totally baffled by selection, and I want him to play in the Oval Test.
Yeah, it astounds me how few people seem to understand the modern Headingley as a surface these days. With all the analytics and everything around. Day 1 is a wicket-taking day. Days 2, 3, and probably most of day 4 is a batting day. And then it turns towards the end. The likes of Don Best don't go to Headingley by mistake. They go to Headingley because they know there's a bit of help for them there on the final day of matches. And nobody seems to actually, over the last 10 years, nobody seems to have actually got the head around that the Headingley plays different than it did do in the 80s and 90s. Neil, in terms of England, I try and put myself in the position of an English player who was out there in India in the winter, got scarred by Ashwin and Axar, who bowled beautifully on surfaces that were helpful to them. But no English batsman's going to be particularly keen to see our Ashwin on the team sheet, is he?
No, absolutely not. I think I disagree a little bit in that I understand why Ashwin hasn't made it in for each of the matches, as much as I don't agree with it. I thought he should have come in for Headingley, but he has done very, very well in India against England. In England, he did very well in the last tour at the start and got hip injury and was very noticeably diminished after that. So I think in home conditions, I don't think the English batters fear him quite as much. He has improved in how he bowls overseas. We saw that in Australia this year. But I don't think there is that level of scarring, and I don't think there's that fear factor at the moment. That I can't actually think of any spinners since Shane Warne who've come to England, and the sight of them makes batters really wary. I think it's something that could happen if Ashwin gets a few wickets in the first session at the Oval, if he plays, which I hope he does. But when I'm in Streatham looking outside my window at the moment, and there's been drizzle this morning, and it's grey and overcast, and I just looked out and thought, oh, typical. The weather's going to change just as the India team are coming here to play. But he knows the conditions a little bit from his one county game there now, and if he plays and if he gets some in the first innings, then I think you could start seeing people start second guessing themselves, which I think was half the problem in India. You saw the likes of Ollie Pope, who lost their wickets once to him, and then suddenly they were jumping all over the crease, trying all kinds of weird things, and suddenly didn't trust their technique. If he comes in and has that kind of impact immediately, then it could cast a long shadow off the remaining two tests.
Had some messages in. Vasanth has said he thinks Ashwin has to come in, plus have to look beyond Rahane. Vasanth suggests, and need golden arm from CSK, Lord Shardle of Thakur, for better batting balance. He would rest Jadeja and Ishant Sharma. That's Vasanth's opinion. And Big Time Dwarf has been back on. He's asking about Parkinson. He's suggesting, this is interesting actually, Knuckle. He's saying, is there a reason Parkinson didn't get a game in Sri Lanka? As we said, he was in the bubbles all the way through the winter. Seemed like the perfect opportunity for England to give him a bit of a go. It's so tough to ask him to come in to play his first test matches against India or Australia.
He's got to play his first test against somebody, doesn't he? If he's going to play. It was a little surprising, particularly once Moeen Ali was unavailable because of COVID. I don't have anything more than it was a little surprising. But I mean, England had plenty of spinners on that tour. You know, Leach and Bess actually did pretty well in Sri Lanka by and large. And you know, Bess was a little all over the place at times, but they both bowled fairly well. I don't know of any reason beyond, you know, they didn't think he was quite ready, or they wanted him for development purposes. You know, there's this thing about Parkinson that people believe. Well, he does bowl slower than most spinners, so that probably plays a little part of it as well. But he has shown in his county championship form that hasn't stopped him taking wickets in England. Yes, at a much lower level where the playing of the spin is not particularly good by most batters. But I don't know that there's any inside information to be gleaned on that. Just going back to Neil's point on Ashwin, since the start of 2018, he's played I think it's 12 away tests, all in England, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. The mean for spinners in those countries is an average of 44 and 3.25 runs and over. Ashwin's taken 43 wickets at 28 and 2.47 runs and over. So just forget the emotional thing of, you know, is he going to get inside batters' heads, and is he going to, you know, win the match by himself? Is he going to do a Murali at the Oval in 98? The bald facts are that Ashwin has shown that he can transcend unhelpful conditions, and he's done it over a period of 3.5 years now. He bowled beautifully in that World Test Championship final, bowled beautifully in Australia on pitches that were bounced, but there wasn't a lot of lateral movement. He bowls brilliantly with the new ball. He's very good to left-handers, and England now have 3 left-handers in the top, or 2 left-handers rather in the top 3. I had Ashwin in my team to play Headingley. I understand why they went with the 4 fast bowlers. Look, when you get bowled up for 78, it almost doesn't matter what your bowling combination is. We can. There's so many. All of that is just a giant sliding doors moment. But I don't think there's much argument that Ashwin isn't going to be effective in these conditions. So the idea that he's not a good overseas bowler has been shown demonstrably to be false.
Vasant's come back on. He's saying, floating around, Raj, that Jimmy might get rested for the 4th Test match. 3 back-to-back Test matches, 39 years old, obviously terrific in the first innings. There's that stat about the differential between his first innings performance and the second innings performance over the last 14, 15 Test matches. But would that surprise you, Raj, if Jimmy was not featuring at the Oval?
It would surprise me, and I don't think he'll be rested. Joe Root and England's men want to win this series as desperately as Kohli. So I don't think James Anderson will rest. He will play. This is probably just my strong guess. But if he does not play, it definitely would surprise me. But if your question is, would England miss Anderson? Then definitely yes, because Anderson has troubled 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the India's middle order. But with Wokes coming in, Wokes adds that extra dimension as well. Wokes is a kind of a bowler, India does not like to face also. So with Wokes and Anderson, England form a lethal combo, and I don't think Anderson will miss the Test. But if he does, then definitely would be surprised, but at the same time, very happy.
Going back to one of the previous points made, would you look elsewhere rather than Ajinkya Rahane at 5? I mean, he's the vice captain. Does India drop the vice captain ahead of a very important 4th Test match?
This is actually a very tough call to make, James, if you ask me, because
I can see Neil shaking his head in the top right of my screen. But let's hear from you first, Raj.
Yeah, it's a very tough call if you ask me, because whenever the chips were down, Cheteshwar Pujara and Ajinkya Rahane have found a way to somehow they've shown that they have something in them to keep the selectors and everybody in a bit of a dilemma. But if you ask me, before this Test series, before this Test match, Headingley, I would have definitely wanted Pujara to sit out and make way for somebody else. But now that Pujara has scored that 91 and definitely looked in control in the second innings of the Test match, now the flag is on Rahane, the vice captain, that if Rahane would be dropped or not. Knowing Kohli and his men, I would think maybe they don't drop either of them. They would definitely trust their senior men to take them through in the coming Test matches. And India has bounced back from these positions previously. 2 recent examples being the famous 36 all out. They bounced back and won the series. Then the Chennai Test match, they were hammered by England and they bounced back to win the series with the same personnel. So I would think that Kohli and his men would want to continue with the same unit. But if you ask me, I would want Surya Kumar Yadav to play as fast as possible. Because you might argue that he does not have a lot of Test match experience right now. In the past, he's played a lot of Ranji Trophy in domestic cricket, but I would want the Indian team to bank on his confidence and form. Sky at the moment exudes that confidence and aura around himself. He would be the right man to bat at number 5, especially in the Oval Test, which is going to be more of a batting surface where Sky would be the perfect man to make his debut.
Let's move on, Neil, to Rishabh Pant. Suggestion. I mean, Rishabh, he's an extraordinary player, and for me, he's the sort of player that you've got to take the rough with the smooth. You're going to get disappointing days, maybe disappointing series, but then, as he's shown in the past, there'll be days where you don't want to watch anybody else play the game because he's just extraordinary. Suggestion on the comments here that maybe chucking him up to open might be an answer. Just go out there and smash it.
Yeah, he's struggling against the moving ball, so let's make absolutely certain that he faces Jimmy and ask him to trust his defensive technique. I think we're falling into the trap where every team has tried to include a leg spinner because they'll automatically be Shane Warne. Every team has tried to include a prodigiously attacking wicketkeeper batsman because there'll be Adam Gilchrist. I mean, look at these two teams who've done exactly that, one more successfully than the other. And every opener can come out and smash it from ball one and be Virender Sehwag. These are players who are pretty much the only ones through the 100-odd year history of Test cricket who have regularly played that way successfully.
It's worth remembering as well, Neil, that Rishabh Pant scored a century, didn't he, last time he was at the Oval? And that was batting in the middle order against an older ball. He was explosive that day. A lot of sportsmen have very good memories of certain grounds, and that automatically makes you feel more positive. Yeah,
absolutely. But if you chuck him into open, then the images I have in my head are Jason Roy, Aaron Finch, huge expansive drives in the first over and getting bowled through the gate. I think Rishabh actually looked. I've said this before about him when he's done well. The clarity in what his role is has been what's helped him, especially when we've compared him to Jos Buttler. But in the second innings, he either charged down or he seemed rooted to his crease, playing away from his body, and that was how he got out in the end. So something had got into his head that had, it'd taken him away from playing in a way that he was comfortable, which is also going to be the way that you defend or attack best, because you end up in that halfway space where you're doing not one or the other. And bowlers as skillful as what England have are going to take advantage. So my advice to him would be, don't be reckless. I'm going to go Shane Warne here. Tee off, but don't be reckless. Look, play positively, but have a clear idea in your mind what you're going to do with each ball on its merits. And don't start second guessing yourself halfway through, because that's when you end up with the bat going out and then you try to withdraw it so that only the edge is out there to get caught, or you end up plinking it halfway.
On his question there, he's looked a bit tentative, hasn't he? He's been, as you say, second guessing himself, not quite sure. And when you're in two minds, the bad decision always wins, isn't it?
Yeah, and the long tail has also not helped because he doesn't have that that solidity in 7 and 8 below him. Having Jadeja especially, but also in India when he's had Ashwin as well, has added some batting depth so that he didn't feel that he was shepherding the tail all the way through. And to some extent, I think he has been inhibited by that, which has put him back into that halfway space where there's no real benefit, only cost.
Let's move away from the England against India series to finish off today with the news that Dale Steyn has retired from cricket. Incredible bowler, fast bowler, 93 matches in Test cricket, 439 wickets, 125 ODIs, where he took 196 wickets, T20 internationals as well, 47 of those with 64 wickets. Longevity, he's been around for a long time. Cricket will miss him, Nakul, won't it? He's been a tremendous performance for inordinate number of teams in South Africa.
To my mind, Dale Steyn is the greatest fast bowler of the modern era. To be able to do what he did, consistently moving the ball at that pace for so long, really until his shoulder went in 2017, didn't have a serious injury, and maintaining the strike rate that he maintained, taking a wicket every 42 balls for 93 Test matches. You look at so minimum of 2,000 balls. There are only 5 above him, and 3 of those are pre-First World War. In George Lohmann, JJ Ferris, and SF Barnes. Dale Steyn, at his peak was absolutely astonishing. I very, very fondly remember his incredible battle he had with Sachin Tendulkar in Cape Town in 2010. Both of them, Tendulkar in his last great peak, and Dale Steyn at very close to his best. And it was Steyn was getting everyone else out for fun. Tendulkar was hitting everyone else at 3-4 and over. But the two of them went at it for what felt like an entire day, and it was just the most astonishing thing you will ever see. And he was an absolute phenomenon.
Raj, what are your memories of Dale Steyn? It's a sad, always a sad day when somebody hangs up their boots. It's like, we talk about it as if he's died, don't we? He's got a long life ahead of him and much happiness, hopefully, for him. But it's a sad day for cricket that we won't see him on the field again.
Absolutely. And my memories about Dale Steyn was exactly the series which Nakul mentioned, 2010 against India, when India went for a tour in South Africa. That is when, and I agree that Dale Steyn was special because Dale Steyn used to swing that ball regularly at that pace. So I think he had a little, maybe 5 kilometers extra than James Anderson, because James Anderson is also a similar bowler who could swing the ball both ways, but Dale Steyn did it at maybe a higher pace. So that was, which was more astonishing. So that was one series which I was completely fond of. And then it was, I think, the IPL, which, or maybe, he had a topsy-turvy IPL for the Deccan Chargers initially. And he came up against AB de Villiers, where AB de Villiers was an absolute freak against him. But my memories was most probably with the red cherry of Dale Steyn, especially in those hostile conditions of South Africa, Johannesburg, where he could swing the ball both ways. I think Virender Sehwag had a tough time against him. Murli Vijay also, suffered a lot against Dale Steyn.
He had a phenomenal record in India as well, at a time when the pitches were not as fast bowler friendly as they are now. And some of the things he did in England and in Australia as well. He would regularly detonate the Australian batting lineups on some very completely flat, dead tracks. You know what? He was bowling in a pretty batting-friendly era in the mid-2000s. Watching him now, I mean, he'd be even more lethal than he was then.
Neil?
Just the best fast bowler that I've seen since I've regularly been watching cricket. I wonder what could still have been if South Africa had the money and resources to manage his game time in the way that they have been able to with Jimmy, and the fact that Jimmy's only played Test cricket for the last 6 years has undoubtedly lengthened his career. What we could still see Dale Steyn doing if South Africa had been able to do that, but he was someone who transcended formats as well, at his very best, and pretty much across the globe, all conditions, he was always a threat. I think we've said up until recently that Jimmy in India wouldn't be a great wicket taker, but he'd use his brain and skills just to keep things very economical and set it up for whatever spin bowlers. I think Dhoni said that he was the difference between the two teams when England won in India in 2012. But Dale Steyn was still a wicket-keeping threat while going at a great economy, and just about as complete a fast bowler as I've ever seen. I'm sad that he's retired, but I feel blessed to have experienced him, especially at his best.
That's what I keep saying about Jimmy Anderson. Soak him into your eyes. Make sure that you kind of burn him onto your retinas, that you've seen him play, because these kind of guys, the Steyns, the Andersons, the Warnes, and what have you, that we've seen in recent times, they're going to be talked about in 100 years' time. They'll be, when people are sitting doing podcasts like we are in 100 years' time, rather than SF Barnes will be much further down the list by then. It'll be the Jimmy Andersons of this world and the Dale Steyns of this world that we're talking about. And he's a tremendous bowler.
Last thing I'll say, that run up Such aggression, such menace, such theatre. Like you could hear the hooves pounding and the drum beats going as he came in. Like his eyes would be almost lasering the hole.
Takes some doing to play the drums as you're running in as well, doesn't it?
It was just pure theatre. Like and it not that kind of wildness of Shoaib Akhtar, but it's such control and such menace. He was an absolute. When we very briefly got Steyn and Rabada bowling it in tandem together, man alive.
Well, there's another one, Rabada. We kind of watch his space with him because he's a tremendous cricketer as well. But and just you mentioning Jimmy Anderson there reminded me of one of the comments we got that when we were talking about him being rested for the 4th Test match. Bear in mind that England aren't playing Test cricket until the Ashes after this. He's got a long time to put his feet up, Jimmy. Hasn't he?
Also, they've had another day off than they weren't expecting. From I think if he does, I said at the start of the series I didn't expect all the fast bowlers to play every game in this series. I know Anderson's a little bit of a special case. Maybe he gets rested at the Oval, maybe, but I can't see it for this Test match.
No, so we'll.
Sorry, at Old Trafford, rather.
Yeah. And it confuses me as well, Knuckle, because just historically, the Oval is always the final Test match, but this time, for some reason, it's the 4th out of 5, isn't it? And the Old Trafford is the full stop on this Test series. Finally,
well, if you want to go conspiracy theories on that, Steve Harmison's been saying that. Depending on what happens with the Ashes, then Old Trafford may be where Jimmy decides to hang up his shoes, and it'd be interesting to see if that had anything to do with the scheduling, so that he would potentially finish his England career at Old Trafford in the way that Sachin did at the Wankhede.
Do you ever think some pundits have too much time on their hands?
I add to the conspiracy theory. I love a conspiracy theory, Knuckle, and it also that would add to him resting at the Oval, so he doesn't pick up a niggle and misses Old Trafford. He finishes at up in Manchester. Final question, gents. Let's go around the group. Neil, who wins? What's the results that we're going to see at the Oval?
I'm going to go for an India win based on how flat the track tends to be at the Oval and a little bit spin friendly. And I see Ashwin coming in. The question is how they manage the bowlers, because I don't think we can go in with such a long tail.
Knuckle?
I think Ashwin will come in for Ishant Sharma, and India will win with Ashwin playing a starring role.
How about you, Raj?
India win, because the last 2 occasions when they were down, I think they come back pretty fiercely. So I predict an India win.
That's an interesting point to finish on, actually, because England are very good at playing a fantastic Test match after everybody's been knocking them, but they're very bad at actually following, stringing wins together. And that's what puts me off maybe an England victory in this one. You don't often see WWW with an England side when they consecutively impress. I think it tends to be up and down with England, but we'll see how it goes. I fancy the draw in this one. I think we might get another draw at the Oval. It might be a batting track, and it might mean that we get 2 big first innings scores, and England are a little bit more confident now with the bat than they were ahead of Headingley, at least. Gentlemen, thank you very much as always for joining me. Thanks everybody for watching / listening to this edition of the Cricket Badger podcast. We'll be back again tomorrow as we put the full stop to our previews of the 4th Test match. And then, of course, we'll be back every single day as we go through the action at the Oval. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.